Valentina Cruz sipped her coffee slowly, the warm aroma mingling with the crisp Parisian morning air. The little café, tucked away on a side street near the Seine, was an oasis of calm in the bustling city. She had decided on a whim to meet someone new, hoping a simple coffee date might bring a spark of lightness to her otherwise packed schedule as a graphic designer. Valentina's dark eyes scanned the room until they settled on the man waiting by the window, Alexander Moreau. Alexander had the kind of quiet charm that seemed effortless. His tailored navy coat and the subtle silver watch peeking from beneath his cuff suggested a world far different from hers. Yet, his smile was approachable, and when he spoke, his voice was low and sincere. They talked about everything and nothing: art, travel, the charm of Paris, and dreams that felt just out of reach. There was a magnetic pull, an intensity beneath his calm exterior that intrigued her. What came next felt almost unreal. Only days after their meeting, Alexander invited her to a dinner in his apartment overlooking the city lights. The conversation turned serious, and to Valentina's astonishment, Alexander proposed marriage. His words were steady, his gaze unwavering. "I want us to face everything together," he said simply. Stunned, Valentina felt a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Who was this man that believed in the impossible so effortlessly? The mysterious air around him wasn't just darkness, it hinted at stories he wasn't telling. And as she considered the question that hung heavily in the air, she realized that saying yes would mean stepping into a life far beyond anything she had imagined. The wedding ceremony was a cascade of light and color, held at a historic chapel nestled among the rose gardens of Monaco's outskirts. Valentina, wrapped in a gown that seemed to blend simplicity with grace, walked with Alexander towards the altar, the hum of whispered conversations and camera clicks blending around them. At the reception that followed, chandeliers refracted light over the glass tables crowded with flowers and meticulously arranged silverware, while the soft melodies of a string quartet breathed life into the grand hall. Yet amid the opulence, Valentina felt an unsteady weight settle in her chest. The man she had married, Alexander Moreau, wasn't just a charming companion from a serendipitous coffee date. He was, as she had slowly discovered, the owner of half Monaco's sprawling business empire, a truth that reshaped her world entirely. The sheer scale of his influence stretched like unseen arms through the principality and far beyond: luxury hotels, real estate holdings, shipping lines, and more. The numbers alone made her head spin, and the expectations colder still. In those early days after the wedding, the transition was more jarring than she anticipated. Alexander's demeanor, once warm and attentive during their whirlwind romance, shifted subtly in high society settings. There was a polish to his expression, a reserve that suggested a need for control, careful to preserve the formidable image he carried. When they mingled with business partners and political figures, their eyes sometimes flicked to Valentina with thinly veiled judgment. Whispers followed her footsteps, not loud enough to be indiscreet but sharp enough to be felt. She overheard snippets, comments on her modest upbringing, playful but cutting remarks about the designer's wife stepping into a gilded cage, and concerns veiled as polite inquiries about her connections or competence. At first, Valentina dismissed it as nerves on their part, but soon the reality settled. She was being undercut, viewed as an interloper who had earned her new place not by merit but by fortune's fluke. At a gala held in one of Monaco's palatial estates, surrounded by chandeliers and silk gowns, the atmosphere thickened. Alexander's closest associates seated nearby occasionally cast cold glances her way, their conversations shutting down when she approached. Alexander himself grew more distant, his eyes clouded with restraint when their hands brushed or when they spoke privately. Valentina's attempts to break through fell flat, leaving her isolated amid the glittering crowd. Back in Barcelona, her closest friends and family absorbed her story with a mix of awe and deep concern. "Are you sure you know him?" her best friend Marina asked one afternoon, the sunlight glinting off their cafe table. "Marrying someone you barely know, who's so entangled with powerful interests, it's a dangerous game." Her mother's voice trembled when they spoke over the phone. "Be cautious, Valentina. Wealth can be a mask, but it often hides more shadows than light." The warmth of her home now felt worlds away from the glamour and whispered critiques of Monte Carlo. During the lavish wedding reception itself, Valentina's unease sharpened into a prickling awareness. As sparkling glasses reflected the shimmering crowd, she noticed subtle but unsettling details, shadowy figures lingering near the entrance, eyes scanning, silent and watchful. At first, she thought her nerves were betraying her. Yet when she mentioned the men to Alexander, his gaze darkened for the briefest moment, a hard edge underpinning his usual calm. "They are part of the world I inhabit," he admitted quietly in a secluded corner, voice low as if sharing a dangerous truth. "Enemies. People who would like to see everything I've built collapse. You have to understand, this is not just business. It's a battlefield." Those words planted a seed of fierce curiosity and determination within Valentina. The luxurious trappings around her no longer dazzled, instead, they felt like the wires of a tightly drawn trap. Who were these enemies? Why would they threaten Alexander so boldly, even at his wedding? More than that, was she part of this shadowed war now? As much as fear tried to root inside her, so did resolve. If her life was intertwined with his, she knew she had to uncover the truths buried beneath the surface glimmer. In the weeks that followed, Valentina began to notice more signs. Hushed phone calls that ended when she entered the room, unfamiliar faces pressing close in public places, a veil of secrecy surrounding Alexander's daytime dealings. At times, his cell phone would ring at odd hours, and his expressions would flicker, a tension briefly visible only to her eyes. Yet when she asked, he deflected with practiced ease, "Some battles don't need your worry. Let me handle them." But Valentina found that her own judgment was changing. The woman who had once sought only the simplicity of connection now stood on the edge of a complex, dangerous world where allegiance and suspicion measured every word and glance. She was increasingly aware that appearances meant everything, and every decision could tip the delicate balance between safety and ruin. One afternoon, Alexandra invited her to a discreet lunch at a private club overlooking the Mediterranean. As they sat beneath the warm light filtering through stained glass, he spoke more candidly about the challenges they faced. "I've underestimated how much the past follows me," he said, sipping his wine. "How many people resent what I represent?" Valentina's heart pounded, not from the romantic thrill of their early days, but from the weight of reality settling upon her. The man she admired was a titan burdened with invisible enemies, shadows that clung to his every move. But beneath the guarded tone, she detected something else, a fragile hope that she might be the anchor amid the storm. Was she ready to be that anchor? The question lingered in her thoughts as she looked out at the endless sea, the gentle waves breaking against the shore like a rhythm she needed to find within herself. Her sudden marriage to Alexander had thrust her into a world she barely understood, surrounded by glimmering wealth and hidden dangers. Yet within that challenge blossomed a burgeoning strength. This was no longer just a story of love at first sight, it was the beginning of a journey where Valentina would navigate the fine line between judgment and acceptance, between fear and courage. As she returned to their villa that evening, passing beneath the imposing gates guarded by watchful eyes, a silent vow unfurled inside her, to meet this unknown world head-on and to understand every secret it held. The questions ran deep. Who truly was Alexander Moreau beyond the public image? What were the stories behind his enemies? And most importantly, what role was she destined to play in the life of the man who had, after one coffee date, become her husband? For those who have ever dared to leap into the unknown for love, Valentina's story asks us, how much would you trust your heart when everything around you whispers caution? Would you rise above the whispers and stand firm? The dance between love and danger had just begun. The days that followed pushed Valentina into a turmoil she could scarcely have imagined. Love, once a gently unfolding song between two hearts, now wove itself through a web of doubt, suspicion, and mounting pressures. The sparkling facade of Alexander's world began to crack, revealing undercurrents of risk and mistrust that threatened to consume everything they'd begun. Each morning, as Valentina watched the sun cast golden hues over the Monaco coastline, a sense of isolation crept in. Alexander, once her confidant and the source of warmth amidst the unfamiliar, grew colder, more distant. His voice carried less tenderness during their conversations, his eyes avoiding hers as if burdened with weight too heavy to share. One evening, at a dinner hosted by one of the city's most influential families, the air felt thick with unspoken judgment. Valentina noticed how the guests' smiles tightened when she entered, their glances briefly flickering to her in ways that stung. She caught whispers, soft conversations about the designer's naive bride and the outsider who fell too fast. The words wrapped around her heart like a tightening noose. She wrestled internally with the reality that in Alexander's world, she was more than just a partner, she represented a symbol, one that many were eager to undermine. The effortless ease she once held in her own independence was eroding under the weight of these cold critiques. The strain extended beyond social circles. An unrelenting storm broke when a vicious rumor surfaced in the tabloids. Valentina was accused of exploiting Alexander's wealth, manipulating the man and his empire for her own gain. The scandal exploded overnight, surrounding her in whispers of distrust and forcing her into a corner where every smile had a sting and every glance a suspicion. The public pictures, candid shots from their private moments, taken without consent, painted a misleading narrative, one that ignored the tender complexity of their relationship. Social media buzzed with commentary, the lines between truth and fiction blurred, and Valentina faced a silent war she had not anticipated. Within the walls of their villa, the atmosphere grew tense. Alexander, too, felt the weight of the backlash, but his responses varied from protective silence to distant frustration. At times, their conversations spiraled into sharp exchanges, not out of anger, but out of fear and helplessness. One afternoon, seeking clarity, Valentina reached out to an old colleague, Mireille, a sharp-minded lawyer with experience navigating Monaco's elite circles. Over coffee, Mireille shared 6 quietly spoken words that settled heavy in Valentina's chest. Alexander's enemies are relentless and cunning. They're orchestrating a campaign of legal and social sabotage, Mireille said cautiously, glancing about to ensure privacy. They want to fracture his empire, exploiting any vulnerability, including you. Valentina let that sink in, the picture of shadowy adversaries assembling against her husband crystallizing into something tangible. Her world, once mapped by clear plans and simple ambitions, was now a tangled forest of threats and alliances, trust and betrayal. With each revelation, an ember of determination grew stronger. Valentina found herself at a crossroads, to retreat into the safety of the familiar or to stand firm, to learn the rules of this dangerous game and fight alongside the man she loved. Late nights became hours of research and quiet conversations with trusted friends, those few she could still trust. She learned of covert meetings, business dealings laced with betrayals, and the ever-present danger lurking beyond public view. Yet, despite the swirling storm outside, moments of clarity and love persisted between them. In private, Alexander's guard softened, and he revealed glimpses of vulnerability rarely seen by the public. A hand reached out, a glance that communicated unspoken apologies and hopes. But the external pressures were relentless. The couple's fragile peace shattered one night when an unexpected visitor arrived at their villa unannounced, a former business partner turned adversary, his presence a clear message that the conflicts were no longer confined to boardrooms or whispered rumors. The confrontation was terse, laced with veiled threats and insinuations. Valentina felt the gravity of their new reality, that the war Alexander fought was escalating, and she was no longer on the sidelines. In the days that followed, a growing sense of urgency gripped her. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and Valentina realized she needed allies within this dangerous world. With cautious steps, she began forging connections, reaching out to those Alexander trusted and others she hoped would stand by her side. Yet, even as momentum built toward facing these trials, doubt gnawed at her. Was she capable of rising to the challenge? Or was she merely a pawn in a game too vast and ruthless to survive? The question haunted her, but alongside it burned a quiet resolve. She remembered the moment Alexander had confided that she was his only hope, not just his wife, but a partner in navigating the treacherous waters threatening to engulf them both. That confession was as frightening as it was empowering, placing a heavy mantle on her shoulders. In learning more about the enemies plotting against Alexander, Valentina understood that their strategy was meticulous, a blend of legal maneuvers, economic pressure, and intimidation designed to erode his influence piece by piece. With every new fact uncovered, she grew more determined to be part of the fight, not as a victim, but as a force. Every setback, every whispered insult, stood as proof that retreat was not an option. One night, as Monaco's skyline shimmered beyond the windows, Valentina sat at her desk, poring over documents and correspondence Alexander had reluctantly shared. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and fierce focus. This was no longer the spontaneous romance of a coffee date. This was a battle for survival, for love, for justice, for the future they had dared to imagine. As dawn neared, Valentina looked out at the horizon with steady eyes. There was no certainty in what lay ahead, but there was hope, and a resolve that whatever came, she would face it with courage. Have you ever found yourself standing on the edge of uncertainty, wondering if love and strength are enough to conquer unseen battles? Valentina's story beckons us to embrace our own resilience when life demands it most. The weeks following Valentina's decision to step forward as more than just a wife were marked by an anxious tension that seemed to stretch across every moment, threading the once peaceful corridors of the villa with whispered secrets and hidden agendas. There was a new rhythm to their lives, born from the knowledge that the quiet networks Alexander once navigated alone were now threads entwined with her fate. One afternoon, while Alexander was away on business in Geneva, Valentina found herself alone with documents, messages, and fragments of conversations gleaned through careful inquiry. The picture that emerged was clearer, but darker, than she had dared imagine. She had discovered a secret alliance among some of Alexander's closest business partners, men whose smiles had always felt just a little too smooth, whose handshakes masked hidden daggers. These men, who once toasted to their empire's success, were now united in a covert effort to oust Alexander completely. Their motivations were tangled in power, jealousy, and a ruthless hunger to seize control. Valentina pinched the bridge of her nose, her thoughts swirling in a storm of disbelief and betrayal. How had those she trusted transformed into enemies lurking in shadows? The realization struck her with a raw intensity. The battle was not only external but deeply internal, woven into the fabric of a world where loyalty was scarce and ambition even scarcer. When Alexander returned home that evening, the tension was palpable. The air between them thick with unspoken truths, Valentina confronted him with her discoveries. It was then, in that vulnerable moment, that Alexander revealed the full depth of his feelings, touching a nerve that had long been concealed beneath the armor of business and stoic control. "I married you," he said quietly, "not only because I love you, but because I trust you. You are the only person I truly believe can help me navigate this storm." His eyes held hers, steady and laid bare. "There are parts of this world that even I can't face alone, parts one needs you to understand, to help me protect." Valentina felt the weight of the confession settle deep inside her. The man she had only just begun to know was giving her a role that would define everything they were to become. To be his partner meant more than marriage, it was a commitment to stand firm in a war neither had anticipated. Shock rippled through her, but so did a fierce courage. Though the path ahead was unknown and dangerous, she embraced her place in Alexander's world, not as a helpless outsider, but as an ally and fighter. In the days that followed, their alliance deepened. Valentina took tentative steps toward engaging those in Alexander's circle who might be trusted, seeking counsel and building a network of support. The villa became a hub of vigilance and strategy, a far cry from the romantic sanctuary idyllic to the casual eye. Amid this upheaval, small moments of tenderness persisted, quiet dinners in the early hours of the morning, fleeting touches that spoke volumes of mutual respect and shared burdens. They were learning to trust not only each other but the resilience that grew in the cracks of their fractured world. Yet the stakes soared higher as Valentina unearthed evidence revealing plans to dismantle Alexander's empire through a coordinated campaign of legal challenges and public relations attacks intended to erode his credibility. The alliances against him were cunning and patient, their moves calculated with chilling precision. The tension mounted toward a crucial confrontation, one that Valentina knew would test every ounce of strength they'd gathered. Night after night, she pored over documents, prepared responses, and rehearsed the carefully chosen words that would reveal the deceit lurking behind polished smiles. On the eve of a pivotal meeting meant to secure vital support against the hostile coalition, Valentina felt the weight of anticipation humming through her veins. The oppressiveness of the moment was shattered by a startling development, a leaked conversation exposing the betrayal of a trusted figure among Alexander's confidants. Betrayal was no longer a shadowed fear, it was a glaring reality. The revelation spread like wildfire, shaking alliances and raising the question of who could truly be trusted. Valentina's heart raced as she stood at the forefront of this battle, the ogre of doubt now replaced by a steely resolve. There was no going back. The alliance Alexander had confided to her was fragile, but it was theirs to defend. Before the decisive gathering, Alexander and Valentina shared a quiet moment, their hands entwined, eyes speaking volumes. "You've been my strength," Alexander whispered. "Together, we stand." As she stepped into the arena, Valentina felt the weight of dozens of eyes, some scrutinizing, some hopeful. Every whispered word and guarded glance underscored the urgent stakes. The path ahead was jagged, but she was ready. This moment invites reflection. When faced with betrayal and danger within one's closest circles, can trust be rebuilt? How can courage anchor us when shadows threaten to swallow the light? Valentina's story is a testament to the power of embracing uncertainty and choosing to fight, even when the cost is unknown. The final confrontation looms, promising revelations and reckonings that will redefine the future for both her and Alexander. What would you do if your world shifted beneath your feet, revealing enemies disguised as friends? Would you rise and confront the storm, or retreat into safety? The next chapter waits to unfold. The grand ballroom of Monaco's most prestigious hotel shimmered with crystal chandeliers casting refracted light over a sea of elegantly dressed guests. The night was charged with anticipation, the air thick with murmurs of excitement and barely concealed tension. What had once been a routine corporate gala was now the stage for a decisive confrontation that would determine the future not only of a man and a woman but of a sprawling empire forged through vision and resilience. Valentina Cruz stood near the entrance, her eyes steady and unflinching as they swept across faces she now recognized as foes, smiling masks hiding greed and betrayal. Beside her stood Alexander Moreau, a man transformed by the recent trials, the weight of uncertainty replaced by a quiet confidence. Tonight was where the past colliding with truth would find its reckoning. As the evening unfolded, whispers swirled of a damning exposé prepared for this very occasion, a presentation conceived by Valentina herself after late nights sifting through documents, piecing together the intricate web of deception spun by those who sought to destroy Alexander's legacy. Her strategic insight had matured rapidly from hesitant curiosity to an unwavering force. With resolve, she ascended the polished stage when the moment was ripe, the glittering crowd turning their full attention toward her. There was a brief stillness, a shared breath, before her voice, clear and composed, broke the silence. "What you will hear tonight," Valentina began, "is not merely the tale of corporate disputes or power struggles. It is a story of betrayal from within, a meticulously orchestrated attempt to fracture and dismantle what Alexander Moreau has built. But it is also a story of resilience, courage, and the unyielding strength found when one refuses to be defined by injustice." Her presentation peeled back layers concealed behind polished facades, confidential emails outlining schemes of manipulation, financial maneuvers designed to destabilize assets, and communications between key players admitting their treacheries. Faces in the room fell from confidence to shock as the truth unfurled. Among the exposed, expressions shifted between denial, disbelief, and fury. The guests, previously entertained by surface charm and status, now recognized the gravity of the duplicity that had lingered beneath. The fallout was swift. Authorities, previously alerted but constrained by the opaque nature of corporate alliances, moved decisively. Legal consequences swept through the circles of power. Social standing and influence among the antagonists crumbled as their facades shattered publicly. Valentina's role in this victory was quietly acknowledged by many, but none so deeply as Alexander. Later, in the soft twilight of their villa's sprawling terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, he took her hands in his and looked into her eyes with a mixture of pride and tenderness. "You fought not as a victim but as an equal," he said softly. "You stood beside me when the world seemed determined to tear us apart. You are my partner in every sense." Tears welled in Valentina's eyes, not from relief alone but from the profound affirmation of her journey. Together, they had navigated a labyrinth of doubt and danger to emerge not merely unscathed but stronger. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more emotional journeys. See you in our next story.